All right. Hey, y'all. Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to, for the first time again in 4 years, Writing in the Hoodoo Tradition. This time it is a book talk with the one and only Phillip B. Williams, the author of Hours, Mutiny, and a whole lot of good stuff. Thank you for bearing with us. Like Phillip said, CP time is a part of Hoodoo, and we wanted to make sure that we got ourselves ritual ready for this experience. This is a Chesapeake Conjure Society event, and we just thank you for honoring the way that Hoodoo lives in our stories. And we're going to talk about tonight the role of the writer in Hoodoo through talking about in Philip's book and with him. So, Toya, our lovely moderator, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you, Hess. Good evening, everybody. So great to see so many of you, and welcome to those of you who are still sliding in. As Hess said, CP time is part of Hoodoo, so we welcome you, and we're excited to see you. I'm really excited to be given the honor to be moderator for this evening's discussion of a book that took my breath away, and to be in this conversation with people who I love and respect, who are writing in the Hoodoo tradition nowadays. So pleased to be among you, and thank you for allowing me to do this. So, our intentions for the gathering today, of course, are just to have a Black good time, and to celebrate our collective heritage during Hoodoo Heritage Month, which I call a newly instituted celebration of a really old tradition. So we're celebrating something that has existed for us, through us, as a people from time. Of course, it has coalesced into Hoodoo here on this side of the world, but it has roots way back before we were stolen and brought here. And so we're going to discuss tonight how all of those coming togethers of traditions and the tradition that it has formed here, how we express that through writing. So, what we intend is for you to be able to witness this wonderful conversation and for you to be able to participate. There are going to be some rules about the ways you participate in the discussion, so please do pay attention to those and govern yourselves accordingly, as they say in the Black church. All right. So, we're going to start with introducing everybody. I very rudely did not introduce myself. Hi, I am Toya Smith. You may see me in the social media streets when we're talking about Hoodoo, in African traditional religious spaces. You might see me being referred to as Iawo or as Iaopa, Oshun Tajobo Eguntola Oshunyemi. That is a full mouthful. Lots of people just call me Iatola. So if you see me being called that, it's all the same person, but you can always just call me Toya because that's what my parents named me, and that is a name that I am pleased to have. I am a writer, I am a priestess, I am a conjure woman, I am a hoodoo. I'm one of the co founders of the Chesapeake Conjure Society, and I'm very pleased to welcome you tonight. And so now I am going to invite the other folks who are on the panel to introduce themselves as well, starting with Phillip Williams, who is the author of Hours, which we will be discussing tonight. Phillip.
Hi, my name is Phillip B. Williams. I am a writer. I write poetry, and this is my first novel, Hours, that we'll be discussing. I'm currently in Philadelphia, and my allergies are kicking my butt. I need a little, freshener, so maybe some mint and something later on. But I'm so happy to be here and really honored to be a part of this conversation. So thank you for reading my work and having this curiosity about who I am.
Thank you. My allergies are also kicking my tail in Baltimore, so I understand. All right, Hess, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey y'all, my name is Hess. First and foremost, I am a mother, so that means you may hear my children in the background because they live in life. in the back, but please include them in the sonic things you'll get from me. I am a hoodoo, one of the co-founders of Chesapeake Conjure Society. I am a strategist in my full-time job, but in my part-time jobs, gigs, I do archaeology, anthropology, museum things, and community organizing around heritage issues and environmental issues too. And I'm just someone who loves hoodoo and loves stories, and I'm definitely my grandmother's child in all those respects.
Amanzi.
Thanks. Hey everybody, I'm Amanzi Arnett. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm happy to be here. So glad to be discussing this book. I called Phillip maybe it was yesterday to get all my first feelings out, all my embarrassing ranting and raving. So I have a more measured conversation today. But I'm in Memphis. I'm a writer and composer. I like to center stories of the South, mostly giving like a folkloric retelling of like modern events. I do a little bit of everything. I just finished shooting a short film that will be out at the top of next year about a local Memphis figure. So trying to venerate the ancestors in that way. So also working film and what else? I'm happy to be here. I'm a newbie in comparison to, to some of these, I feel like. So I'm happy to be a part of this conversation and also hear from y'all what y'all have to say. And that's all I got.
And Julia, you want to round us out?
Hey y'all. So my name is Julia Mallory, and oh my goodness, I really consider myself a storyteller, and my foundational creative love language is poetry. And so when I saw that Phillip, a fellow poet, wrote a novel, instead of reading poetry during National Poetry Month, I was reading ours. And so I come from Alabama, Georgia folk, and I'm a mama of three. And I'm currently based in Harrisburg, PA, which I call the little chocolate city that tries. And so I'm super honored to commune with y'all tonight during Hoodoo Heritage Month, and in particular to really ground our discussion and traditions through Phillip's work tonight. So super grateful.
All right, y'all. So we're going to set the scene with our panelists, and we're going to start talking kind of broadly about what is your personal definition of hoodoo. So we all have kind of a general understanding as we go into tonight's conversation. So do one of y'all want to go first about your understanding of hoodoo and what it is? Phillip.
I was going to say, am I part of the? Can I do this too?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please.
And so just from different conversations, pastiche and different conversations I've had with people who are in the tradition or adjacent to the tradition, be it Ifa or they're into maybe Palo Mayombe, so they have some knowledge of just, a general sense of African traditional religions, or they're deep, deep in it. For me, what I've gathered is hoodoo is African American based. It is something founded here on this continent through the experiences of those who were enslaved. And of course, there's going to be other influences, but it is founded here. It's not one of the spiritualities that come from West Africa. It's something that, was built so that we could have our own kind of ways of healing through the earth, predominantly understanding our connection to the earth, understanding how the spirit and the flesh are united, and how everything that we need is through community and from the clay, the storm, the leaves, everything that is given through spirit, through whatever the concept of God is. So hoodoo for me is also always in question as to, do you have to be initiated to be in hoodoo? And some say yes, and some say no. But what I think is the general answer to that is, if not initiation through what we know as a kind of collaborative effort from elder down to beginner, then at least a way of binding oneself to a spiritual understanding as to how one wants to navigate through the world, through how they understand hoodoo to be. So yeah, that's my understanding of it.
Cass, co-founder, you want to talk?
Yeah, my definition of hoodoo is it is a very domestic tradition, culture, religion. It is a tradition that makes you look at the people around you, and that is the people that you do work for, with, and sometimes on. Um, Primarily, like starting with yourself. So it's kind of like this ripple effect tradition. I'm someone who practices hoodoo as my religion. So I see it as a religion. I navigate it that way. And for me, it's my religion that makes me look around this world. And every place that they have said is desolate, I see abundance in it. And that also starts within myself as a person with a Black body in this world and what that means. I see it as a tradition that has, of course, it's a tradition of memory, of rememory, as Toni Morrison calls it, of what we did not forget, but then also remembering that this soil and the position that our ancestors were put in made them have to take it and create something different. So I think it's one of those traditions that is in response to injustice in a way. It's both memory and response. And I think it's beautiful in that regard. I see it as a black, it's black. I know it is black, and that you are born into it. Like Mama Ru says, hoodoo is a culture. You born into this culture. And that's why you can get some plants together and rub them together and put some water on them. You can call forth things, but unless you are of the culture with the who and the what and the where and the why, then it's not hoodoo. And that's how I define it too. It's very domestic. It's starting in yourself.
Amen. Amen. Julia Amanzi, you want to jump in?
I don't mind. Um, uh, Everything that from people that practice and things I've read and things I've experienced, the most broad, simple definition I give for myself is that it's a community-based practice of maintaining a relationship, a connection to what's real. I think that many people think of hoodoo as this, magical, metaphysical thing, which it is, a spiritual. But I think that the spiritual world is also something that's very real that we've been taught to shy away from. And so I think that the rituals and practices associated with hoodoo allow you to connect with nature, your higher self, and the spirit world, and everything that, despite what colonization and many other things have told us, are the real things about our experience. Yeah, that's all.
So I think for me, I understand it as my inheritance from waymaking Black folks. I understand it as my like the earthly manifestation of my spiritual and material responsibilities. Um, yeah, I think in addition to basically what everybody else said, but energetically, like that's how it feels in my body, and that's how I interpret my relationship to hoodoo.
I always say that hoodoo is Black American culture. It is all of the things that makes us who we are is hoodoo. So there is no separation between the spiritual things and the earthly things. It is all of the things. So yes, it is the spirit of Black folks, but it is also our dances and our songs and our food and the way we wear our hair and the clothes that we wear and the feeling that we bring to everything and all things. All of that is hoodoo. And so yes, you can be an active and knowledgeable participant, but if you Black in America, you already participating in it. You swimming in it. You surrounded by it. You're a part of it, whether you know in the front of your mind or not. There are just some things about all of us that is hoodoo. And if you go through no other initiation, you go through the initiations of blood and water. It is the blood in your veins and the water of the womb brings you into hoodoo. And so, yeah, we all go through that initiation in one way or another. All right, but let's slide into the meat of the conversation now that we have some understanding for where all of us are coming from and what we are talking about when we talk about hoodoo together. I'm going to invite Brother Phillip to introduce the book to us and really get into it and let us hear some of it. I am thrilled to hear it in your voice because I've been reading it for myself and, you know, crying and snapping and catching my breath and gasping. So I look forward to hearing from you about your book and hearing the words of your book.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So, Ours is a novel that from the time it began to the time when I finished it in 2022, it took 16 years for me to get all together. It started off as a short story in undergrad, and then it spiraled and spiraled into this epic tale about a conjure woman named Saint who goes to Arkansas, annihilates the plantations there, and then brings those that she's freed just north of St. Louis to a place that began as a town called Graysville, but with her intercession becomes Ours. And the story revolves around just these people who have this newfound freedom being free. What does it mean to discover freedom for yourself, to already have known it, but to redefine it? What does it mean to redefine oneself with the new rules and new obligations that one has built for oneself? And finding new love relationships, new ways to love, new ways to eat, drink, breathe, have fun. And she's allowing all of this through also some ways where she doesn't always know how her conjure manifests. And in that, her memory is lapsing, and then it allows for other people with their own agendas to come into town and wreak havoc in some ways. And most of it is in good intentions, but the results are oftentimes very deadly. So that's the gist of Ours. If I say anything else, it'll just give everything away because the book is so long and everything is interstitial. So I'll read from an earlier part of the novel. If anybody wants to follow, I think I'm going to start on the top of page 13. And this is where, after Saint has pretty much solidified the town as Ours, she recognizes that the stains of enslavement are still on the people. And so she wants to do this ceremony, which is kind of like a baptism in a way, so that they can wash off all of the trauma, all of the horrors, the poor memories of that very violent time, so that they can begin anew in this new spiritual, physical transition. Saint told everyone to come to Creek's Bridge at sunset and to bring whatever meal they can share. Everything you can spare and even what you can't, she said. The musicians were to bring their instruments. She told everyone to dress in something to dance in. As soon as she finished speaking, wild strawberry pies went into the oven, and someone started roasting a pig, boiling turnip and collard greens, enough to feed the entire town. The children searched for clothes to wear and waved garments over their laughter like flags. When time came to head over to Creek's Bridge, they went straight to the water. Lanterns hanging on pikes arranged in a circle, a large bonfire in the center made it bright enough that they saw everything in front of and all around them. Food furnished a few tables farther from the creek, and the fiddlers began to play. Saint had changed into a small white dress with a large yellow ribbon wrapped around and knotted at the back. She wore no shoes and encouraged everyone to take off their own. She went to the bonfire and started clapping. Soon everyone clapped with her in unison. Clap, clap, clap. And she began to dance, to twirl and laugh. The children joined her first, then the women, hopping up and down and spinning about. The summer night had not cooled much since daytime, but they moved in the heat, the fire yanking sweat from their bodies, and their naked feet sliding on the grass, their arms spinning above their heads. They touched their faces, put their fingers in their mouths, tugged on their ears, and stomped the ground, their bodies moving and creating a new rhythm that the men had to change their claps to fit, the claps now being determined by the dancers moving, while the men got to stomping and shouting joyfully, syncopating their palms to the women and children, and if the men got off beat, they fixed that by paying close attention to the feet blurring and kicking and stomping near the fire. So they laid down their instruments and played a song with their bodies, and their heads got to nodding and hips to rocking, to gyrating, to the claps pulsating around them, changing, 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 and their mouths open, and the funk of the body let loose, the sweat and the stink all in the hair, until somebody hollered something beyond a word, and they kept on hollering it, the sound leading it to another sound, into a new sound, loud from the mouth, like a spirit trying to answer the bodies, or the bodies trying to answer the spirit that wouldn't be contained, as their legs kicked and their heads rolled into their movements, spoke in tongues, and the throat got to letting out a moan here and a groan there, and the sound of pain left their flesh, while their muscular bodies and their thin bodies and their fat bodies and their sickly bodies glistened in the fire, and every child screamed as they jumped and spun, and every man clapped, moaned, and testified with their feet to what sounded like it hurt so bad, it must have hurt them so bad, coming up out the body, out the burning well of the throat, out the wet of their spit, wailing, lifting up from their bodies, now contortion flexed and contracting on the ground, eyes fluttering in their heads, the body creating a new way of being, a new way of thinking, creating a new knowledge that belonged to them. Then Saint stopped moving and stood up. Her body shook and shined. Her companion brought her a rooster and a knife. She struggled to keep herself still and raised her arms in the air, the rooster in one hand and the knife in the other, and screamed as she separated the rooster's head from its body in one clean swipe. At that moment, Saint felt the gate, the breach between the living realm and the spiritual realm, swing open over the creek. Everyone stopped moving. Their bodies heaved in the flame-bent light, in the grooves they made in the earth with their feet. Without much thought, they all went to the creek and let the waters flow, rinsed first their feet, then their knees as they knelt, then their faces. Their entire bodies cleansed in the running water, the water taking with it all that wasn't theirs to carry, their bruises, their traumas, their hardened melancholy. They returned to the fire to dry off and admire each other's faces in the warm light. Out of breath, they sat and reclined, naked, and none rushed to hide themselves, while the ground, the earth that had once haunted them, felt softer beneath them.
Come on, poet snaps. Woo, the breath.
Like, ooh, right? Like that's every revival, that's every shouting service at church. Like that's every going to the river if you're in a tradition where you go to the river to be bathed. For me as a priestess, that's the moment of the slicing for Ebal, you know, the pouring forth of the blood, like nothing lives without blood, nothing happens without blood. And then we just talked about the blood and the water and the initiations of blood and water. And woo, I found myself just rocking side to side as you were reading. It was just so beautifully evocative. Like you could hear it and feel it and smell it and be in it. Like you can imagine yourself as part of the circle of the dancing people.
Thank you.
Whew. Whew. I'm gonna give y'all like the rest of the panel. Do y'all want to have initial reactions before I go in and start asking all kinds of questions of Phillip? Y'all have reactions you want to share?
Just initial reactions. I haven't seen someone write a scene like that since declaring in Toni Morrison's Beloved.
Yeah.
And I was like, and this is where this is a book where, like, that's why when I messaged you, I'm like, it's on the Chesapeake Conjure Society website as a book you must read because it is a book worth your time and your daggone money. Okay. And like, that is to be able to bring someone's body sensorially to a place just through words on a page where all they can do is read it, and if they're lucky hear someone speak it, that in itself is this type of manifestation. When I say manifest, I don't mean the new age, whatever. I mean the etymological, to bring something that is already there to the surface, like a ship's manifest. You, through that passage, brought something that's already in us to the surface, like a ship's manifest, in all of the symbolic ways that is. And that's why I was like, yeah, he got it. He be trying to say, I don't know nothing, but you know enough, apparently.
And thank you for naming the clearing scene in Toni Morrison and Beloved, because that's definitely what I felt. And I think also, I imagine, as Toya was saying, that, for Black folks, there's, hoodoo being a part of a certain tradition, an inheritance. And I just imagine if folks if they have not felt connected prior to reading this passage, I imagine what something like this would unearth in them, and what they would feel if they hadn't felt connected in that same way before. Yeah, I'm gonna just leave it at that.
Um, yeah, I love this passage because it like appeals to so many of your senses, and like that type of possession is it's hard to describe to someone if they hadn't seen it, but it really feels like you're able to be a witness, which is such a big part of spirituality. And so that was just masterful. Like I loved it. It felt like you were in the midst of it.
Thank you. Thank you. And so much of like these ceremonies, rites of passage, rites, they are secretive. So it's not like it's not like you can ask someone and say, "Hey, can you take me to your..." No, they can't. They absolutely won't do it. And I try to tell people when they go to New Orleans to be, to witness a quote unquote voodoo ceremony, it's like you will never see that. You will never be allowed to see that. What they'll show you is something that is very much a performance to distract you from the ceremony that's happening back in the swamp. So they keep you out of the true place. But working with what it is that I did have, but then also using intuition and trusting that because I guess because I love us so much that I'm not gonna write something venomous. And with the understanding that what is what I'm not allowed to know is not necessarily a detriment to the imagination. There's still plenty of space to bring something very beautiful to the fore um, without stealing, right? Without, sneaking into a place and taking notes and then bringing it back. It doesn't happen that way for a reason. So I'm glad that it still resonated with everybody.
You gave me a perfect segue. You gave me a perfect segue into what was going to be my first question about this book and the writing of this book, which is about your exposure to root work, about your exposure to conjure in your life, and why you made it a necessary part of telling the story of ours.
Yeah. I didn't even know that what my family stories, particularly what my mother told me about her father, I didn't even know that was hoodoo until I learned later on what hoodoo is. And so her father was from Alexandria, Louisiana, and he came up to Gary, Indiana. And it was in Gary where he lived with his sister. And I saw the house. I visited the house when I was a child. It seemed like it was in the middle of nowhere. Gary was loosely populated. There were trees everywhere. There was no pavement on the road. It was just stones. And so he had been living, like that for a while. And the next house over might have had the space of three houses between it. And so the story goes when he had, in the earlier days of him living in Gary with his sister, there was a woman who wanted to visit T. T is his sister's name. And every day he would salt his thresholds. And so he'll have sea salt on the windowsill, sea salt on the doors, at the door frames, at every threshold, any crossing way. And so the woman knocks on the door, he opens it. She's like, "I want to speak to T, da da da." And it's hot, and T is gone. She's coming right back. And so he invites the woman in, and she moves as though she's going to cross the threshold. And then my mom says, her daddy says she pulled back. It was like, "No, I'll wait for her out here." It's like she couldn't move over across the salt. Something was stopping her from crossing the boundary that he laid to protect his household. And so he kept asking her like a few times, and then eventually she just, said, "No, I'll just come back till I came by." And that story stuck with me, and a lot of other stories that she told me. And I started, just doing reading and researching Zora Neale Hurston some more and Toni Morrison for a class I wanted to teach. And I was like, oh, this is what my grandfather was doing. So it was already in my life. I just didn't have a word for it. It was already something that had been enfolded into the spiritual practices of my family because he was also a Christian pastor who was doing these, these different kinds of um, these different ceremonies, these different belief systems, these different practices. And it really made sense to me then that why I wanted to write this book, because in some ways it was a document of a lot of the things that I believe but didn't know where I got those ideas from. Like a house can talk to you, uh, for instance, can tell you what's been there, who's been there. And more, I felt like the story was also one to tell because in the tradition of hoodoo, the fact that there is a community that necessitates that energy of the of the religion, it made sense then to have a freed group of those who were slaves to be the forefront of the story and not have to be whipped, not have to be lynched, not have to be burned, and not have to have that kind of violence inflicted on them throughout any part really of the story. Now, because it takes place in the antebellum South, there's still going to be resonances of that history because it's a historical moment. But it's not the slavery is not the main antagonist. They antagonize each other, and they test each other, and they do trials by fire in that way. So yeah, all of that unfolds into what hoodoo in a larger sense meant to me, which was a celebration of freedom under the the leadership of a self and in a self that is integrated into a community. And these people are freshly making this community. So it makes sense to me to do it that way.
Yeah, I love the use of it so much because hoodoo is such a liberation technology. It's a liberation theology, right? And so to know that that conjure was used as a means of freeing these folk, but also once you get to a place where you are free, what are the things that we do to one another in that
Yeah.
context, right? When slavery is no longer the big bad, then what is the big bad? Because we still human beings. And we still out here together. And what are the things that we do to one another? Um, and speaking of freedom, that was such a big, when I was thinking about, the kinds of questions that we could come together and ask one another and talk about, that was one of the big things that stuck out for me in the book, freedom and safety, which
Yes.
seemed like they were a either or sometimes, right? Like you
Mhm.
could keep folks safe, but in order to do that, you have to imprison them some. You have to keep them
Mhm.
from being free. Or folks can be free, but freedom is dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Freedom comes with dangers and you can't keep people safe. Um, and so I wanted to talk not just to you, of course, Phillip, but even a little wider across the panel about how you saw freedom and safety vying for space in the book. And what
Mhm.
does that mean about our personal agency as hoodoo practitioners? Like, how do we use these things that we know and that we have to free ourselves? How do we use these things that we know and we have to keep ourselves safe? And can you have both of those?
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out while writing the book. Every time someone made a decision, it had a reverberation later on for another person, another character, be it something as small as purchasing a watermelon or deciding that they didn't want to live in a certain place or live a certain way anymore. And the way that something that seemed so small could shake an entire community, I couldn't I couldn't figure out why that kept happening until I understood that there's a way one's individual freedom cannot be removed from this idea of a communal freedom. And this idea that freedom is always collaborative, it's not an individual way of moving through the world. If I am free, then that means that I also believe in not imposing on your idea of freedom, but it has to work in a circular reflexive moment. And some of these characters, they want their freedom, but they don't necessarily want for the circumstances that come after their freedom they don't want to be held accountable for that. And it helped me to really think through what freedom meant to me. And as I was writing, I kept thinking, well, I can't be free alone. I have to have a freedom that can coalesce with other people's idea of themselves. And their freedom has to allow me to have that kind of space so that as individuals, we're stronger when we're together because we are understanding one another through a lens of a kind of protective sense of individuality that allows for these Lego blocks or these bricks to form a house. And that's really where the safety comes in. The safety comes in for these characters and ours is where they realize that not only are they stronger together, but they're stronger when they recognize that if one of them is not free, then it completely obliterates the entire project. If one of them is freer than others, then that means that someone is not free. There has to be also a leveled playing field of free. Otherwise, the power dynamics get into effect, and then that's where you have oppressive forces come in. So I was constantly trying to figure out, can one be free and safe? And I think yes, but not alone. It always has to be within a communal understanding of how does my personhood converse with your personhood, and then we create something that allows us to have an open sense of self and all of its practices.
Unless any of y'all want to jump on in on that topic, freedom and safety.
I mean, I think Phillip hit all the points, and I think probably all of our shared interpretation of how freedom was functioning in the community, and when those power dynamics, namely with Saint, some of how those problems started to manifest in the community.
I'm gonna give y'all two a second before I move on. All right, there you go.
Oh, Monty, go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I was since Julia mentioned Saint, I guess that's where it mostly comes up for me, like Saint as this sort of maker of the community, and a very like almost like a parent of the community, and how like we think of maternal figures or any parental figures, how they try to keep you safe so much that they bind you. So even though she freed all these people, there was always this tension. Um, of like not wanting to keep them there, like tell them you have to be here, but she had all these other mechanisms that kept them there as well in order to keep them safe. And so I think she almost is I'm sure that was intentional, the main embodiment of all that tension. Because I think like, she wasn't, even though she inflicted a lot of pain, I think she always had intentions to keep the people safe,
Right.
people together. And so you could always see the whys, but there was always, like Philip said, a repercussion for her decisions. And just, I love how that was in that one character so boldly.
I was going to say safety and freedom. The themes of that made me think about the questions people have in terms of liberatory practice, in terms of getting rid of prisons and other carceral things. Because the big question is, how do we take care of those who do bad things?
Right.
And then it's like, and then people are like, I don't want to go through that. And the reality of, freedom is dealing with all of humanity. And in order to take care of the people who do quote unquote bad things, and bad being so contextual, we have to live through that fall line together. And understanding that human nature, or just energetic nature of the earth, there is always going to be some chaos and some tragedy. And the only way that we keep moving forward is through that community. So I thought that was such a beautiful theme to pull out for not just Hoodoo, not just Black American reality, but also thinking about our indigenousness to the earth.
Mhm.
And even if this never happened, we'd still have to deal with the chaos that is human possibility at times.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, I don't think, I think as a mom, especially now that my daughter is actually an adult, um, freedom versus safety are in my mind all the time, right? Because at this point, I'm letting her loose into the world. And I think of Saint, as Amanzi was saying, it's kind of like the mother figure of ours, right? Like this is her baby. She created this thing. She gave birth to this community. And as a mother, as a parent, all you want to do is keep your babies safe, right? And sometimes that comes with tethering those babies, binding them to you because you think the only safe place in the world is at your side. And so that is inherently a restricting of the freedom of those you love. It is saying that you're not going to find safety anyplace else except right here, right? And so then their movement is restricted. Their even their vision for themselves, I think, is restricted. Things become very, very small if you think that the only safe space is right here. You can't see yourself beyond this little circle of dirt that you occupy.
And
Like
it
the
was
twins
important for
being
me
by
not to
St.
have. Oh, what was that?
Oh, I was reading Hess's note in the chat saying like the twins being by Saint. And I'm like, yes,
Oh
yes.
yeah. Oh yeah. It was important for me not to have Saint be matronly though, right? So she has this symbolic way of being the mother of the town or those that she's freed, but she also wants a lot of distance from them so that they can figure things out on their own. She just doesn't want them to figure things out on their own in amidst a lot of danger because she knows that nothing can happen if they're constantly interfered upon by some external force, be it whiteness or be it well really it's just that the at that time it's just really what are the terrible ways that white people can imagine undoing whatever it is that we built. And so she's wary of that, but she's not a coddler. And then the least bit, she's not going to hold you, she's not going to kiss you, she's not going to do any of those things. But she'll tell you the truth. Sometimes it'll be in a harsh way. And she also has these ways where she knows just when you need a little bit of love. There's a conversation that she has with the character later on in the book, Thylas, where she tells Thylas just leave a little bit for yourself, like not Thylas, Thylas, Mrs. Jenkins. She tells Madam Jenkins, just leave a little bit for yourself. You can't always give it away. Always give it away. So she'll have an understanding of what's needed, but she doesn't want to come off as that magical Negro who's just so happy to help everybody. Oh, Lordy Jesus, I can't wait to, heal the world. She's like, you have your things to do, I have mine. And then when we have to come together, we'll do that. Yes.
Yeah, I see Julia talking about that difference between provider and nurturer. And as I was listening to you talk, Philip, I was like, she feels so much like my grandmother in some ways, right?
Mhm.
Who was not overly touchy-feely and not overtly lovey, right? Because in her mind, I created this space for you. You have this home, you have food, you have clothes, you have all of the things that you need. And you don't need me to be loving on you all the time. This is what love is. Like I gave you space. That's love. And so yeah, it feels Saint feels very Black grandma to me, in the way that I experienced that Black grandma energy. Um, and speaking of love and the ways they are expressed, we want to talk about love relationships a bit,
Yeah.
right? Including queer dynamics. And so those are depicted in ours, right? And so we want to talk about the power of love, the power of lust, the power of desire. I know that when I tell people that I'm a hoodoo practitioner, the very first thing they ask is what kind of love works you can teach them, right? How do you, what can you teach me and how to draw somebody to me? How do you teach me how to make somebody stay, right? Teach me
Mhm.
how to make somebody want me, all that kind of stuff. So can we talk some about the ideas of love and lust and desire in the work?
Sure, sure. Someone pointed out to me everyone is paired off in some way. And I think as a writer, it's because there are well over 20 characters. And so in order to keep them together, pairing them off instead of having five people talk at once was the easiest way to do that. But also subconsciously in writing the novel, And what is the bulk of this and the majority of this work as it is now was written between 2018 and 2022. And, you know, during that we had COVID, um, where it's rear its ugly head, and that isolated a lot of us. So I think that isolation and sense of loneliness is definitely in the book, and the way that the characters find someone as an equal to speak to, be it, you know, Joy eventually having moving from the Francis to, you know, building a relationship somehow with Abba, and Saint and Francis, and then Luther, Phillip, and Justice. So everyone has someone that they can speak to and figure out, discover more about themselves through. It's not always friendly conversations, but they're always helpful conversations. And I think this goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about what is freedom. And someone asked me, is what, you know, what is the difference between freedom and love, or how they relate it? And particularly when it's romantic. And what I came up with was, at least in the world of ours, that love is possibly more challenging than freedom, because it takes two free people to be able to have healthy love. If you have someone who's free and someone who hasn't necessarily found themselves, or don't really know how to ground themselves, who they are, where they come from, and you're trying to bind with that person as a free person, you might lose your own freedom in that way. And more than likely you will. You'll lose some sense of yourself. And so where, you know, freedom is definitely beginning with the individual and then molding with the community, love is having two people who are definitely sure of their freedom, and then making a small universe to always stay, or at least for the length of the love, whatever is fated, to to always encourage and feed into each other's freedom in that way. And that sense of ownership and belonging and control, that can really haunt some, you know, a couple who doesn't yet know that in loving someone, be it platonically, but certainly romantically, there still have to be ways to navigate outside of whatever that relationship is, be it with friends, or be it through having separate goals or separate hobbies, things like that. And that intimacy makes it challenging. It can make it really challenging. And so, yeah, in ours, you see that kind of intimacy making these relationships more complex than even I really knew that they were going to go, particularly thinking through Luther, Phillip, and Justice, who are often read as a queer couple. I read them as queer in as much as we don't really see heterosexual men bond in this way. And I think that they do. And I know that for a fact that they do bond in this way. But I have no issues with people reading them as lovers. Then there's the other couple I can think of is Franklin and Foster, who, you know, Foster is solidly an understanding of who he is, what he belongs to, what his spiritual path is. Franklin has no access to any of that. And so when he meets Foster and he feels himself falling in love, what he wants to do is own Foster. It's like, well, you need to move here and we need to live in this way. And Foster's like, I'm part of a community. And it's a community that is based off of some Hoodoo tradition, but also voodoo, a voodoo community. And he's like, I can't just leave these people here. This is where my blood work happens. These are the people I protect. And Franklin can understand that. And it leads to absolute devastation for both of them. So yeah, thinking about how love and freedom are in conversation with one another, and love, arguably, not definitely, our love can be a more difficult concept to understand than freedom.
Can I speak to the, wait, can I speak to the
Yes,
love?
please do,
Okay.
Julia. Go ahead.
So I think the characters, you know, the way that we see them all, not all, but the way that characters are learning to become tender with each other, the different types of love that we see in this book. One of my favorite scenes that literally just, I felt all the things when the women formed the circle around Ruth and
Oh, yeah.
trying to lift her up and trying to connect with her. Um, I mean, just to know a love like that in community where folks, and we talk about what does accountability look like, and we have somebody who has caused harm, um, and they feel like we believe that you are better than this, and can we come and can we convene? Can we figure out what's going on with you? But when you mention about Foster and Franklin and this idea of love and ownership, it just made me think about this passage. It's almost towards the end of the book, but oh my gosh, the character Joy and I'm
Oh, join Abba.
no. Her companion at first.
Francis.
Francis. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, y'all. I was having a little brain fog at the moment. So when Francis is talking about the relationship that she, like two relationships she used to be in, and she was
Yeah.
talking about being with Frida, and she said that he didn't have to worry about much though. He told me he loved me, but I don't know. It didn't feel like when Frida would say the same thing. Hers felt like she was freeing herself every time she said it. His felt like he was hitching a bag of rocks to my back. I can't even remember his name.
Yeah.
And so something about that, I think for any folks who ever known love like that, if you ever known the difference in the contrast, and there's a lot of discussion around love, like, unhealed folks in the book, or I think even Saint or someone, I think Saint might have said it like, the love taking on the shape of the wound.
Yeah.
So I think you get in all these layers about love and how it manifests, and it made me think about like, oh, what type of lover am I? Right. And not
Wow.
just like in a romantic sense, but just how do I love people? Right. How do I love people? Because being a mama, being these other things, and just thinking about even the possession piece of it, like, oh, I know I got a little bit of saint in me, right? I see a lot of myself in Joy, and I think also too just about people's love and the grief and how they are trying to figure out both of them. Um, yeah, just that part about her saying that every time she said it, it sounded like she was freeing herself.
Yeah.
Sound like he was hitching a bag of rocks to my back. Whew.
Yeah. Thank you, Julia.
Hmm.
I'm glad you brought up Philip, and jeez, a brain fog for me.
Justice.
Justin.
Justice.
Justice, yeah. Their relationship, because I kept reading close, and I was like, wait, are they gonna like thinking that was gonna develop into something else. And once I realized it, like, wasn't, I don't know why I was so relieved, and like that made
Mm,
that and overjoyed. It's like, oh, they got to be this without it being this thing that I imagined it was going to become, and that felt so special to me. I think it's so rare that that's written well, and like you said, those relationships do exist. I think we're afraid to let those relationships exist, and
right.
it showed a great deal of restraint to allow that to exist how it was. Um, but also, I want to bring up like Saint and her companion when we talk about love and freedom, and how like sometimes love involves releasing someone, and how her inability to do that. I don't know who's read the whole thing, so I won't. But her inability to do that impacted them both so um, violently and traumatically, and how that didn't have a good ending for her. And I was just thinking about how like she loved him and wanted to hold on, and how that affected their relationship, and how we aren't that good at confronting that aspect of love either. Is that the person can be free with you, but also there's a time to free them completely. Um,
Right.
so
Right.
that's how it relates to me.
Nice.
Yeah, there's the love that sets you free, and there's the love that binds. And that's why I usually refuse to teach binding works to people
Mhm.
when they come, and that's the first thing they ask for when you're talking about love works. They'll say, "How do I make this person stay?" I'm not going to teach you how to do that. I'm not going to teach you how to do that, because that isn't love, right? You can force somebody to stay beside you, but that isn't love. Love should come with freedom. And that means freedom to come and go, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody has to stay with you. Nobody, no matter how much you love them. And that includes our children, the people that we bring into the world. Nobody has to stay with you. So if it ain't free, it ain't love, you know? And so, yeah,
And
I
people don't,
refuse to teach that mostly.
yeah. And people don't know like the same, there's never the expectation or the idea that you're looking for a binding spell and someone else is looking for a separation spell. The person who's with you might be looking for a completely different and opposing energy than what you're looking for. And King and Honor experienced that when, one who was King goes to Saint to, bind Honor to him, and Honor goes to saying, like, can you keep this man out of my hair? And it ends up just being a stalemate, and they both mad at her. She's like, I had nothing to do with it. You didn't think that you were plotting against one another, which is a conversation that you should have had beforehand. So much that can be dealt with just communication. People go to conjure for. It's like, no, that's not what this is about. And it just didn't work out for them at all.
You get the right conjurer, they will tell you, you don't need a root for that. Go talk to them. You just talk to them. Or you don't need a root for that. You need a therapist, my love. Go,
Yes.
go and find a therapist. I'm not gonna give you oil for that. So, all right, we're digging so good into this conversation. I'm trying to keep us moving along to make sure we're in time constraints, but I want to talk about names, right? Because all of the names in the book are so resonant. We have these big names like Honor, Justice, and King, and Saint, Joy, all of these things. I was so moved by Miss Wife.
Mhm.
Like the idea of Miss not being a title, but actually being a state of being. Like I am in the state of missing something. I'm in the state of longing for something, grieving the absence of something. I thought that was so beautiful. So wanted to talk to you about naming, how you arrived at these names, what these names mean within the context of the novel.
Yeah, Miss Love, Miss Wife. Miss Love, Miss Love is the first of the misses, and then Miss Wife comes because he's inspired by what she's decided to do. She misses the love of her life. She wants to, in her name, she wants to honor the feeling that is in her. And he decides to do the same with Miss Wife. He's like, well, I miss my wife, you know. Um, so why not name myself this feeling that is perpetual with me as a way to honor it? And so that's the way that they get their names. From now on, my name Miss now ran Miss, and my second name is Love. And she doesn't really give the reason why, but it's speculated as to why. But Miss Wife does say, I miss my wife, so maybe I'll just do that. It doesn't work for him later on when he tries to get a job because the white folks think he's messing with him. Um, they were like, "What's your first name?" He says, "Miss." He said, "Pardon, Miss." Spell it, Miss. Is that short for something? Miss my name, as in like I miss my name, whatever the original name is, right? So there's also a play on words. And they're like, well, what's your last name then? He says wife. And they just sent him on home. They're like, you're not gonna mess with us. And so there's also a way where our names are not always going to be understood by every audience. The way that we name ourselves or the way that we see how we move through the world, and how we project ourselves outwardly through a name, we're not always going to be understood through that, whether it's the name we were born with or the names that we change to for spiritual reasons. Not everyone's going to know or be able to embrace the you that you know is the most succinct and precise version of you. And so the names throughout the book are ways for people to really honor the trajectory of their plot line. So Justice has a plot line that is about, being allowed to feel like life is fair in a very unfair world, to be able to take the reins of his life and take control finally for once. And that to him is an idea of justice later on. And then you have Saint, who in many ways really embodies that if we think about the way that Christianity syncretized with the Yoruba, so that you get something like Candomblé, you get something like Santeria, and you can still honor your ancestors or honor your Loa, but you're using a different name, so folks don't really know what it is that you're doing. And so her taking on the name of Saint, which is really given to her by a mentor, to me is her bringing together these two worlds that are often in conflict with one another.
Yeah, I love that. As somebody who is in a tradition where they give you all of these names, right? And all of those names mean a thing, right? When somebody says the name to you, they are saying something about you. There is something so big about the naming of oneself and requiring that other people use that name for you, right? And that you're going to draw a line here. This is a thing that Miss Wife, yes, was turned away because some white folks was like, you playing. But no, this is his name, right? This is his name. This is what he has named himself. And that was one of like the big decision he made in Freedom is how do I intend to be known? And the blessing that you are giving someone when you call them by the name that they have chosen for themselves. Like it's a validation, it's a confirmation, it's an I see you, I hear you, I understand you, I acknowledge you in the world the way you want to be acknowledged, by using this name, this beautiful thing that you have given yourself. So yeah, I was very, very moved by that. As somebody with such a short name that is messed up all the time. And so just even the little thing by telling people it's Toya, not Latoya, or it's Toya, not Tanya, that I've been doing for 46 years. Like I understand the importance of names. And one of the things that is such a part and parcel of Hoodoo as a tradition, is the naming of our ancestors. It is the veneration of our ancestors, the remembrance of them. And the saying goes that as long as they are spoken of, they never actually die, right? And so as you can continue to speak somebody's names and tell their stories, they're still alive. And so what does ancestor mean? What does it mean to be a good ancestor? Um, and not just asking Phillip, asking all of y'all, but like, what does it mean to you? The idea of one day you're going to become ancestor, right? Um, and so how do you become a good one? And do we choose whether or not we become an ancestor? Because some folks ain't ancestors, some folks just dead, right? So let's talk about ancestry as part and parcel of the story, but also as part and parcel of Hoodoo as a tradition.
Can I just ask like a quick, it's like a bridge question, I feel like, because it was about the names. And Philip, you had said like there's like 20 characters in this book. And I know like because part of for me, ancestor veneration is storytelling is central to that, lifting up the names of my folk and bringing those stories through. And I just have a quick question, Philip, because you have all these characters and they're so rich and so textured. And the story obviously is written, is published, but like, do you ever find yourself missing the characters? Do you ever find yourself missing your connection to those characters?
Yeah, I grieve hard for these people. Yeah.
Mm.
And there were some readers who were saying, is there going to be a spinoff for such and such character or later on? So no, the story is what it is, But Luther, Phillip, and Justice in particular, I'm always like, I wonder what happened with them. And Luther Phillip, he went west, so I really don't know what happened, with him. There's a way that in just creating them, I refashion parts of myself. I learned so much about myself just writing this book. And, what I believed in and, what I learned were my loopholes in love that I thought were pretty solid. It's like, oh, I have something that's a kind of unfair idea of love. Okay, let me be thinking about that as I'm writing this book. Um, so yeah, I think about these characters all the time. And then I think sometimes they're going to be echoes of them in future novels. I'm already starting the second one that's going to be contemporary, but thinking about some of the lessons that I've learned and how to write this one, I think there are also going to be maybe unspoken blood relationships. I don't want it to be a direct sequel, but I for sure see that the trip that Selah takes towards the end of the book, we're not going to say what it is, allows for there to be a lot of possibilities as far as who is related to whom, in the future.
Mm. Thank you for that.
For me, I think that's part of being an ancestor is allowing yourself to be related to in so many different ways, allowing people to have connection with you. Because if you spend so much of this world in isolation or hyper romanticizing the idea of the crone or hyper romanticizing the idea that to be a real root worker or a real writer, you have to be off in the woods all the time, then you're not just an ancestor by the tangible, non-living things that you produce. You're an ancestor by the living things you produce and the relationships you're allowed to have. And so I think that's part of what makes you an ancestor and part of what makes you an ancestor versus someone who's dead, because allowing yourself to be related to, not just the simplistic sense of, some type of genetic or physical or social closeness, but related to as in seen, as in uplifting, as in loving, as in doing the best you can, even though that will never ever be perfect, as in being ridiculously and beautifully human. I think that's what makes you an ancestor.
I like that idea of like being related to makes you an ancestor, because I think about even doing my own digging into my ancestry, like so many people who seem lost to history, and I find little tidbits, and like I find that they're like someone in the family, and I can like sort of resurrect them in a way. And people that even intentionally hid, because they might have not have thought that they deserve to be at the forefront of something now, like they're so interesting to someone who came long after them, and they're venerated and they get to be seen and put forth. And so I think that's the cool thing about ancestor veneration, is that you get to live on. And I don't know, like I don't know if we choose. Like I think I do sometimes with my work. I can tell some people like don't want to necessarily you poke around, and they're like, I feel some resistance. So okay, leave that person alone. And so maybe they're choosing not to be elevated in that way. But I do think um sometimes, you can bring somebody to the forefront, like I said, who didn't want to be elevated, um, because they didn't believe that themselves, especially, Black folks, and how go too deep in our ancestry, how we taught to keep our heads down. And I like the idea of relating to each other to sort of reanimate people. But I don't know if it's always a choice. I think somebody after you loves you enough to choose that for you. I could be wrong. Uh,
Trying to keep us rolling along because I know we are in hoodoo time, but also I know we are in the time for the Zoom. So I'm trying to make sure we get all of these conversations had, but also give folks who are in attendance time to ask questions. So I want to pull something together into this part of the conversation we're having right now, because we're talking about what it means to be an ancestor, what it means to be venerated, what it means to be worthy of veneration, and for a panel full of writers, right? What does it mean to be a writer in the tradition? Is this how you're going to show up as an ancestor? Is this what you are trying to leave behind of yourself to the community? What is the role of a writer in the hoodoo tradition? I tell people all the time, each of us have roles, and not everybody is a root doctor. Not everybody is a conjurer. Not everybody is going to be a diviner. Some of us are going to be storytellers. Some of us are the writers. And so what does it mean? Where do you see room for yourself in the tradition?
So if I'm honest, I think my biggest pull is through storytelling. I think just coming from a family of strong storytellers, I think I feel a huge creative responsibility. And so like there are specific stories that I think they are also asking me to make sure that people remember. I think there are tales that they're asking me to give shape to so that other people will know their names and know their experiences. Um, and there's one story in particular that I had heard as about 15 so years ago, heard bits and pieces of, never really could put it together until I was like looking at documents on ancestry.com, and then was like, oh, I think this is what my aunt was trying to say. And the aunt I'm referring to is my great aunt, my grandmother's twin sister. And so the interesting piece about that is that as I was writing this story, one of the things that came to me was that basically my ancestors were basically saying to me, we're going to give you this story, but we can speak for ourselves. And so even though I'm writing a short story that's fiction, they also want it to be a play, because I think that's where they really want to come and really do their thing. So they're like, but we know you need this foundation to at least kind of do this investigative piece, fictionalize it. We already give you the dialogue, but then we want our moment to shine. And so I feel a huge responsibility to pull these works through, and just make connections that I always can't make. But when they are giving me bits and pieces, I try to work with them. So I feel that my future ancestor self knows that I'm leaving a literary lineage. I'm leaving the material manifestation of like community creativity to be found, to be discovered, to be explored, to be connected with, to be enjoyed, to be disagreed with. I fully believe that. And I think I'm supposed to be leaving this example. And then I work in other mediums and genres as well. So that's why I consider myself a storyteller, even though I work in, poetry or film. Or I think the important piece is make sure these stories are not forgotten. Make sure people know our names. Make sure people know us. And then and I feel when those stories are coming through, I feel so close to my people. I feel so close to them. And so I just want to keep doing this work. And that's what it feels like to me to be a storyteller in this tradition, for sure.
Yeah, so much of ours that when I was writing the book, I felt like I was channeling. I was sitting in the computer and then I'll look up. It's like, when did I write all of this? Or I'll walk, I'll pace back and forth and have a conversation with the characters. Like, you sure you want to do that? That's crazy if you want to do that. I'm gonna write it down, but you're gonna have to get yourself out of it. Like like they're the ones who are really making the decisions, and I'm just putting it on the paper and then seeing, what life those decisions can take. And it happens to me in poetry too, where someone will just hit me and I'm like, well, maybe I'll just do this, and then the rest of the poem falls in line. It just makes sense. And it's not a purely intellectual decision. Sometimes it's just an inkling. Um, Sometimes I'm not even paying attention to where the change is happening. I just know that I want to make this change, and then it's it just makes everything fall in place in a very interesting way. I felt that a lot of the times when I was writing hours, like I was having a conversation with a bunch of people, and they were just trying to keep it on the right path.
I think my space in terms of writing within these traditions, like first and foremost, I think of myself these days as an archivist. Both of my parents were that, even if they didn't know what that meant. Especially my mother, like the records that she kept regarding our family, just are mind blowing. And I think that's where my heart is, and that's how I honor and keep my ancestors, and even just members of the community that aren't my family, figures in Memphis in particular. But I think that writing for me is a tool to contribute to that, like to contextualize things, to flesh things out. Because I do have an imagination, I can look at names and dates and make connections. Like that's a story there, and that makes me feel so connected to them. And so any other writing I do is just to, appease myself and my little sensibilities. But the real reason, the core of why I'm here is to fortify the archives that exist and continue that tradition.
I think of the writer in the Hoodoo tradition as somewhat in the lineage of the trickster in Hoodoo, because tricksters around the world deal with language and they also deal with how to utilize the technology for yourself. And so, even though as Black folk, as Indigenous folk, we are a very oral people, we are not unfamiliar to the technology of writing stuff down. But because we live in this very Western world where the written word has so much power over what's said, because they say what's said can't be remembered or substantiated, we're like, all right, then we're going to play by your game and we're going to write this down. And I think that's the role of the writer, is to take what is oral and to also be able to give oral things and to be able to decipher, what can I write down, or what can I say, or how can I write it down in a way that only people who are of this, they got it and they know what I'm saying. And I'm not giving the whole thing away. I'm just, giving them a part where it's going to enliven a part of them. Like I think of the role of a writer in Hoodoo as a trickster, and as, if we're doing this with integrity and love and intention, as the one who is the chaotic good in the world and making statements. And then I also think of the role of the writer in the Hoodoo tradition as someone who keeps memory and also knows how to decipher. Okay, if I say this is nonfiction, what they probably do is won't print it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna write a fiction book. I'm gonna write a play. I'm gonna write a poem, because then you just have to trust me in this story, and being able to make that authoritative decision as well.
Folks call me a writer, and I think of myself that way, but I think of myself more as a storyteller. Um, I will write things down on a piece of paper, but I always love more to give breath to the story. Like, I like to tell it, I like to read it. And so in the tradition, as part of the tradition, as a practitioner, I kind of think of myself as a hunter-gatherer. Like, I go out and I find the parts of us all over the place, and I gather those parts together, and I weave a story out of those things, and I tell those stories. And I never tell the story the same way twice. That never happens. That is part of the trickster of it, right? Of the story, is that you're never going to hear that same story ever again. And yet, as somebody who speaks to the dead and for the dead, and who the dead speak through, in the time that I'm telling the story, I bring the dead back to life. And so they stand up, they breathe again, they dance again, they love again, they talk to us again, they move again, just for the space of the time where I'm telling the story. And because I'm telling it to you and it is coming on my breath, and you are sharing that space with me, and I breathe out and you breathe in, for that moment, all of those people who are alive for me are alive for you. And so they never die. And so that is my part of the tradition, is keeping our dead alive. It is gathering us together and giving us breath again, just for a moment. That's what I think of as my part. All right, y'all. We're going to give all of y'all a chance to continue this conversation, to be a part of this conversation with us. Remember that I told you at the beginning, there are rules that we are asking you to stick to, especially now as we're running really low on time. And so what we're going to ask is that you ask one question. Do not try to slide a two-parter in there. So don't try to do. So Phillip, when you were writing it hours, what did you think about? And also, while you're talking about that, can you also don't do that. Right? Ask one question and try to ask it in a few hot seconds. So get your question together, and feel free to ask us. I think you can write things in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself or show yourself on video. But also, Hess, is it okay for folks to unmute themselves and ask their questions right quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, questions from the audience.
And don't be afraid to take a deep breath in real quick and out, because there's a lot of goodness there too.
It was a lot today. So if y'all don't have questions, I still have some. So I'm giving you an opportunity before I jump back in. All right. Yana or Jana, want to make sure that I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Please pronounce it for me, and then go ahead and ask your question.
It's Jonna. Thank you. First of all, I read this book as a library book. I had heard about it actually from Hess's page, and then I was like, I have to go buy this. So my question is, what theory and like works, if any specific theory, did you come to ours with? Because I'm noticing like ties with like other books of like speculative fiction or like books that like question like Black utopias and like what freedom and liberation and justice would like look like for Black people in America.
Nice, nice. Let's see. It's a children's book. It's called Her Stories, Virginia Hamilton. And it's folk tales, fairy tales, African American tales. And I was reading that when it came out. So I probably was like maybe 8 or 9 years old. And those stories stay with me. I think as far as a theory goes, or maybe even a technology, like a science way of thinking about what it is that I was moving through, most of those were through conversations with other people and realizing that there were these shared experiences that we had with, thinking that we were living in reality and learning that we were living in a surreality, meaning that a lot of the ways that we thought we understood our lives were supplemented with, or even more precisely founded in, what people would call ghost stories, or the legends of a family, the legends of a community. So there was a lot of that that allowed me to trust myself in telling ours, because I figured then there'd be a built-in audience, because these are the ways that a lot of us tell stories, or have had stories told to us. There are how can I do this? There are a lot of books, just period, all over my house. Um, Two books that helped me to understand how to better read Toni Morrison, is Kay Zalditu Selassie's book, African Spiritual Traditions, and the Novels of Toni Morrison. Um, and Lavinia DeLuise Jennings, Toni Morrison and the Idea of Africa. And through those books, I was able to come out and find other kinds of books. So for instance, there is Maya Deren's Divine Horseman, um, A Refuge in Thunder, which is Condomble's Black Spaces, Alternative Spaces of Blackness. This is Rachel E. Harding. And another book that I grew up on is African Mythology. I don't even know if you can find this anymore. It's one of those Avon books. So but any book on African mythology can help. And so I just kept pulling and pulling and pulling. If I found one name, I'll Google the name and then see if they had a book. Or if I found one myth, I'd Google that myth or go to JSTOR, some kind of online database, and just see if I could, find different articles. I work best that way. And then the more I know, the better my lives can be, so I can tell a nice, believable fiction story. So yeah, there's a lot that I pulled from, but a lot of it did start from just childhood stories and having conversations with people who know a lot more than I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question as we're wrapping up and coming up close to time? No other questions, reactions? All right, y'all. All right. I just wanted to thank all of you for being in this space, for being here with us tonight. Of course, our biggest primary thank you to Phillip B. Williams for the book. For the book. Yes, for joining us and talking to us, but for that masterpiece, for that great masterpiece that you've put out into the world. I know I'm going to be sitting with it for a really, really long time and revisiting passages Yeah, and thinking about it still always comes back to safety versus freedom for me. So I'm gonna be thinking about that for a long time and how they coexist. I also want to thank Amanzi, Arnett, and Julia Mallory, and of course the wonderful Heslov for being on the panel in the space with us, for talking to us about writing in the Hoodoo tradition. Thank you to the Chesapeake Conjure Society, of course. Thank you to those of us who are actually doing the work here on the ground in the Chesapeake area. And thank you to all of you for coming and joining us and being in the space and sharing your energy with us tonight. We will be sending out, Hess, are we going to be sending out links and stuff